Mark sat at the kitchen table, staring at the bills piling up in front of him. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, but his heart felt heavier than ever. He had worked as a construction worker for over 20 years, building homes for other families, but it seemed like his own family's needs were always just out of reach. His daughter, Emma, had just been accepted into a prestigious university. It was her dream to become a doctor, and she had worked so hard for it. But the tuition fees were more than they could afford, and the thought of disappointing her was unbearable for Mark. Without telling anyone, Mark took on an extra job working night shifts at a factory. His days became a blur of hard labor, and his nights were filled with the hum of machines and the ache in his muscles. But he didn't care. All he wanted was to give Emma the chance she deserved. Months went by, and Emma noticed her father's weariness. His face seemed older, and he was always too tired to talk or play with her younger brother. One evening, Emma found him asleep at the kitchen table, his head resting on his arms, surrounded by bills and paperwork. It was then she realized what he had been doing for her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she gently placed a blanket over him. She couldn't let him sacrifice himself like this, not for her. The next morning she approached him. "Dad," she said softly, "I know what you've been doing." Mark looked at her, confusion and worry in his eyes. "I don't need you to work so hard for me," she continued. "We can find another way. I can get a scholarship, or maybe take some part-time jobs. I just don't want to see you like this." Mark smiled, though exhaustion weighed heavily on his face. "You don't need to worry about that. A father's job is to make sure his kids have everything they need, and I'll do whatever it takes to see you succeed." Emma hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Dad. You're my hero." Mark's sacrifices were never spoken of after that day, but Emma knew that every step she took towards her dream was built on the silent strength and unwavering love of her father. As the years passed, Emma worked hard in school, driven by the memory of her father's silent sacrifices. She balanced her studies with a part-time job, determined to ease the burden on her family. But no matter how much she contributed, she knew that her father was still working long hours, his body slowly wearing down from the physical strain. Despite everything, Mark never complained. He continued to wake up before dawn, heading to the construction site with a smile. His hands, once steady and strong, were now rough and cracked, but he held his head high. Every tired moment was worth it, knowing that his daughter was on the path to a better life. One day, just before Emma's final exams, Mark collapsed at work. The doctor said it was exhaustion, combined with years of physical labor. They urged him to rest, to slow down, but Mark refused. "I can't stop now," he told them, "not when Emma's so close to achieving her dream." When Emma heard the news, she rushed to the hospital. Seeing her father lying in the hospital bed looking smaller and frailer than she'd ever seen him broke her heart. She sat by his side, holding his hand. "Dad, you don't have to do this anymore," she whispered. "You've given me more than enough. Please let me take care of you now." Mark smiled weakly. "I'll never stop being your father, Emma. My job is to make sure you have every opportunity, but maybe I'll take a little rest now." Emma stayed by his side, her heart filled with gratitude and love. She promised herself that she would make his sacrifices worth it, not just by becoming a doctor, but by living the life he had worked so hard to give her. Months later, Emma graduated with honors. As she stood on stage, receiving her degree, her eyes searched the crowd for her father. There he was, standing in the back, his face glowing with pride, despite the cane he now needed to walk. When she approached him after the ceremony, she hugged him tightly. This is for you, Dad. Everything I've done, everything I've achieved, it's because of you." Mark's eyes filled with tears. "No, Emma. It's because of your hard work. I just gave you a little push." Emma smiled. "You gave me everything." From that day on, Emma dedicated her life to helping others, just as her father had helped her. And though Mark's body grew weaker with age, he never stopped supporting her in every way he could, proud of the woman she had become and the sacrifices that had been worth every second. In the end, Mark knew that he had given his daughter the greatest gift a father could give: his love, his time, and his unshakable belief in her potential. As the years continued to pass, Emma's life became a testament to her father's enduring influence. She expanded her clinic, offering services to those who couldn't afford medical care, much like her father had quietly given his own time and energy to his family without expecting anything in return. Her clinic became a safe haven for the community, where people felt not just healed physically, but supported emotionally. Emma often thought about how much her father would have loved to see what she had built. His image was with her in every patient she treated, every difficult decision she made, and every time she stayed late at the clinic, knowing someone needed her help. In the waiting room, a framed photograph of Mark sat on the wall, a symbol of quiet resilience. Though no one but Emma truly understood the significance, it reminded her daily of where she came from and the strength that had brought her to where she was. One particularly cold winter evening, Emma was just closing up the clinic when she noticed a young man sitting in the waiting room. He looked exhausted and was holding a small child in his arms. His clothes were worn, and the fatigue in his eyes reminded Emma of her father all those years ago. "Are you all right?" Emma asked, walking toward them. The young man looked up, startled. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go. My daughter. She's been sick, and I can't afford the hospital." Emma knelt beside them, her heart aching. "You're in the right place. Let me take a look at her." After examining the child, Emma realized she had a severe respiratory infection. She quickly treated the girl, easing the young father's anxiety as she explained what was needed for her recovery. The man looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and relief, much like Emma had looked at her father so many years ago. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, tears welling up. "I've been working day and night trying to make ends meet, but I couldn't even afford to take my daughter to the doctor." Emma smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me. Sometimes we just need a little help. I know what it's like." As the man gathered his things, he paused to look at the photograph of Mark on the wall. "Is that your father?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Yes, he's the reason I do what I do." The man smiled faintly. "He must have been a great man." "He was," Emma said, her voice soft but firm. "He taught me that love isn't just about words. It's about what we do for others, even when it's hard. He gave everything so that I could have a better life, and now it's my turn to give back." The young man's eyes filled with gratitude as he hugged his daughter close. "I'll never forget this. You've given us a second chance." As they left, Emma stood by the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. Her thoughts drifted to her father, as they often did. She imagined him standing beside her, proud of the life she had built and the love she had shared with those in need. In that quiet moment, Emma realized that her father's sacrifices had not only given her a future, they had created a ripple effect, touching the lives of so many others. Through her work, Mark's legacy of selflessness and love would continue to grow, far beyond what either of them could have imagined. And as she locked up the clinic for the night, she whispered softly. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." This extension brings the story full circle, illustrating how the values and sacrifices of a parent can shape not only their child, but an entire community. Emma's work becomes a living legacy of her father's love, continuing to touch lives just as Mark's sacrifices once touched hers.